Imagine being born into such wealth that you believe you will always be the pampered son, even after you have destroyed the economy of your nation and the hundreds of years of tradition your family has built. For Prince Andrew, this was true, but when he received the news, everything fell apart. What had happened? What impact did it have on Andrew? Furthermore, who was the one who broke the dreadful news? To find out, watch this video through to the conclusion. Given a position and a public persona that transformed errors into footnotes and excess into expectations, Prince Andrew was born into a life that was intended to shield him from repercussions. That arrangement worked for decades. The access, the parades, the costumes did more than adorn a man. They allowed him to. Then a thread came loose. A rope was formed from the thread. Everything was unraveled by the rope. The interview is typically the first image that comes to mind. It's the tone, not the facts or the well-practiced denials. He attempted to explain how creatures may be seen while sitting in front of millions of people. He provided an odd list of justifications. The interview did not land the blow because of the Pizza Express line, the inability to perspire, and the strange claims of memory loss. A man who had never learned to answer for himself was depicted. The mob used the weapon it gave them. The response was swift and brutal. The carefully manufactured air of a military hero and obedient son was replaced overnight by incredulity and derision. In contrast to the accusations, the incident gave the controversy a solid form. The result was rapid institutional estrangement rather than a gradual decline. Patronages were taken away, titles were revoked, and the authority to speak on behalf of the crown vanished. Instead of holding a public trial, the monarchy took action. His identity-defining privileges were revoked with administrative finality rather than with dramatic declarations. His name no longer had the same weight when he signed it. The office that bestowed that courtesy had been quietly recalled, so he could not enter a room expecting a salute. A court's theater was absent from the palace decision. The fact that more evidence kept coming in after he stated it couldn't be true only made his story worse. In an alleged 2011 email, he told Jeffrey Epstein that they were in this together following the publication of a photo linked to the controversy. It wasn't just a statement that implied loyalty. It implied cooperation and defense of one another. He claimed to have cut ties with the public line, which is located next to that supposed private line. The apology he never quite succeeded in making is undermined by the private letters. It depicts a man who is comfortable around monsters and liars and who is unwilling to face the repercussions when the mirror comes for him. The public, which had once applauded, now condemns. Polls today portray a nation that wishes to eliminate the remaining traces of its status. Most respondents, regardless of age, provided a straightforward moral ledger as their response. They don't want him to act as their spokesperson. The organization that previously exalted him does not want him in its line of sight. That isn't a specific detail. It is the collective opinion of a society that cannot connect the claims and the pattern of concealment with the image of royalty. The figures are straightforward. They reduce a single civic rejection to millennia of civility. The rumors spread behind closed doors in ways that are detrimental to him. A man who expects the theater to accommodate his every desire is described by former employees. There is a story about teddy bears, specifically 72 of them arranged in a specific arrangement, that has become popular. They were taught to be arranged by a maid. He might get furious if they weren't positioned exactly. This kind of small-scale cruelty does more than just fuel rumors. Character is revealed by them. They show that he refused to take responsibility for the small-time oppressions he carried into adulthood. They demonstrate what power looks like when no one is looking. The story was deemed telling rather than trivial by Vanity Fair and other interviewers of royal employees. It was part of a bigger design. Scandal becomes a story of moral failure because of its tendency. Pointing to a single email, interview, settlement, or lawsuit is simple. However, Pattons don't live a carefree life. The way minor humiliations accumulate into a behavioral structure is how Pattons live an accumulation. Instead of bragging about his privileges, he started to use them. He fostered relationships through secrecy and urgent money. The mere human cost of those brought into his circle was something he refused to acknowledge. The plot did not change with each new discovery. It made things heavier. The attempts to salvage status came next. These were no modest excuses. They appeared to be requests. He felt that he had a right to be let back into ceremonies and lives. According to one biographer, the answer is no, according to authors who have researched the family and its role in it. He will not be reinstated by the royal apparatus. His private life, minor routines, and enduring entitlement tendencies have made him someone the institution needs to keep under control rather than highlight. His entire universe has been reduced to a garden and a lodge. While a nation discusses stripping titles, he watches television and plays golf. It is a life that has lost its center and cannot be regained. The audience must leave part 1 at this point with the image of a man whose armor is gone and whose instinct is to lash out, rather than with a suspense that softens him. His inability to represent the monarchy has been determined by the palace. The public's visage has changed. Private letters continue to surface, demonstrating the disconnect between his behavior and his statements. His expression is that of someone who has been told the one thing he finds unacceptable. He appears to be someone who thinks he can still negotiate with a non-listening world. Thus, we conclude with the query that keeps viewers interested and the plot moving. What is left of the man who believed he was untouchable when his life is based on privilege and permission and that permission is taken away? It will be more difficult to respond than to accuse. Whether any idea of redemption is left to be claimed will depend on the gradual deterioration of reputation, the unrelenting flow of evidence, and the silent choices made inside the palace. Behind palace walls, we must first gain a deeper understanding of his conceit before we can determine whether or not he believes that he is untouchable. You are mistaken if you believe that petty dictatorships that take place behind closed doors are inconsequential. Because there is a pattern and an uncovered personality behind the public controversies and headlines. A man who thought that everything in his environment was there to serve his needs. In essence, he views them as inferiors who should be controlled. In The Rise and Fall of the House of York, one royal biographer characterized him in this way. Employees claim that, like a pampered child demanding his toys back, he called his protection officer only to retrieve his golf balls. He would let a tissue fall to the ground. You can count on someone to come get it from 4 levels down. The curtains were opened by another person. And someone. Anything. When you have entitlement, what is dignity? He demanded more than simply accuracy. He insisted on ridiculousness. Due to a mole on his face, one man was fired. Over a nylon tie, another fired. Employees who disobeyed the unseen regulations were demoted. Not for serious offenses, annoyances, or small flaws, as though he thought the world was his stage for perfection. According to stories, he would label someone a dumb idiot for something as ridiculous as not correctly referring to the Queen Mother. A cheap jest was hurled, an insult. This wasn't behind the scenes, it was genuine, incisive, and well known enough to be documented. These aren't strange eccentricities. They are omnipresent, repetitive, consistent, ruthless, arrogant, and prone to rage. A sneeze, a mispronounced title, a misplaced tie, or a mole might cost a staff member their job or their day of peace. These tales are heavy. They show that he is petty and vengeful when no one is looking. Then there is the general populace, who used to regard him as a member of the royal family and the son of the queen. Royal is not visible to them. They perceive arrogance. They witness an adult man with golden privilege still having tantrums about plush animals. The bizarre nature of the teddy bear collection is what made it go viral, not its cuteness. To help them arrange themselves, dozens of bears took pictures and laminated cards. Social media users make fun of him. A man who has no self-awareness in 50 or 60 teddy bears. Here are some internet comments. Andrew is a complete jerk. Prick the employees. Nothing but a conceited brat. Manchild, arrogant ass, defenseless without his titles, and, depending on your point of view, the ridicule and laughter are either the worst or the greatest. In order to demonstrate how they ought to appear as holy relics, teddy bears lined up with photos. He would prefer call attention to your flaw than his own fault. These are testimony, not merely rumors. Employees who departed in tears. Protection officers are forced to perform unimportant duties. Those who served with royal blood received nothing but disdain. What does he do, then? He doesn't think. He doesn't say sorry. Even if his world is closing in on him, he licks his wounds in silence, rages in solitude, and expects to be healed. He clings to status as if it were his shield rather than his captivity. For some people, power is like a narcotic that never goes away, even when the rules are changed. He still has a lease on a suite that was once in Buckingham. Preferences and expectations. He's not going to be small. He will not back down. Despite the fact that the monarch, the palace, and the general public have turned the key in the lock, he maintains that the palace still yields to him. Then there are monetary losses. His security is taken away, and his allowance is almost reduced. He was forced to downsize under the king's pressure. These are symbolic as well as cost-cutting. You are not who you thought you were, they remark. The same thing is caught in one detail. The Royal Lodge was retained by him. He continues to struggle for space, both real and imagined, desiring his address, his presence, and the past. To cherish him, despite the fact that he has lost it. Because believing that you can regain power is worse than losing it altogether. Reality is sutures that won't hold, but pride wants that illusion. He believed the scandal was over, but this section demonstrates that it was just the start of a character, brutality, and immature outbursts disguised as royal requirements. Furthermore, no minor outburst, degrading demand, or dismissal over a mole is insignificant. He is erecting a wall between himself and any chance of salvation, brick by brick. Thus, this is the question that remains after this conduct. What type of man still chooses brutality and vanity when the stakes are kindness, decency, and humility? And what happens if everyone around you begins to perceive your privilege as entitlement, public collapse, and royal abandonment? The entitlement started to fade as the world realized he was a joke, and the ramifications from that interview began. It finally blew its lid, exploding like a volcano that had been smoldering beneath the monarchy's surface. And the heat was intolerable when it blew. A legal warning sounded very instantly. Days before the Newsnight interview, Andrew's then chief of staff was pled with by a defamation lawyer, Paul Tweed. The interview was a nightmare waiting to happen, he warned. They didn't pay attention to him. They hung up the phone. Nevertheless, Andrew continued, believing that damage could be avoided. No, it wasn't. The media's decision was made quickly. Car collision. Level of a nuclear explosion is bad. The monarchy's worst public relations incident since Diana. It's what was written in the papers, not hyperbole. The world flinched. Andrew appeared amazing, painless, and unafraid. Institutions, non-profits, regiments, and public organizations that had previously welcomed his presence gradually withdrew it as the weeks went by. One by one, his honorary military positions were taken away. Patronages ceased. Once an uncontested birthright, the style His Royal Highness was later subdued, downscaled, and stopped being used officially. His Royal Highness Prince Andrew, Duke of York, was no longer there. The crowd, the public, turned as he was being demolished. Poll after poll displayed a sharp, resentful change. According to a study, 67% of Britons think Andrew should forfeit all of his titles. Just 5% of people still thought well of him. The pollsters saw a decision rather than a time of uncertainty. Local outrage followed. Residents of York, the city where he is named Duke, demanded that he be deprived of his title. More than 70% said yes. Freedom of the city and other public honors were taken away. Schools thought about renaming. His name was dropped by events. His title was viewed as toxic by places that were formerly proud to mention him. Meanwhile, the tension was evident in the royals' semi-private hallways. In addition to portraying him as flawed, the biography and the rise and fall of the House of York also portrayed him as petty, spiteful, and egotistical. There were other anecdotes of people who were upset about a staff member's mole, fired someone for wearing a nylon tie, sent in protection agents to get his golf balls, and demanded that maids from 4 stories down open curtains. His character was ingrained with these tales. They caused far more harm than a courtroom could. It was about losing face as much as it was about losing power. The monarchy, which is usually cautious with appearances, decided that Andrew's actions were no longer acceptable. Senior advisors in King Charles started to approach Andrew more as damage control than as a brother or son. The palace pulled back. His attendance at formal family gatherings became infrequent or symbolic. The possibility of his name or presence making headlines was weighed against even small things like being asked to funerals or Easter. Additionally, financial threads were cut. The governmental funds, the security, and the allowances that silently and privately sustained him started to dwindle. He still had a lease on the royal lodge where he resided, but without the benefits and status that came with it, sustaining it became difficult. According to reports, King Charles stopped providing Andrew with financial support in a number of ways. It was a clear message from the top. You are free to remain, but everything that once made you a global celebrity is being taken away. Not everyone in the royal family is silent these days. According to sources, Andrew feels a great deal of pain about losing his titles, prestige, uniforms, and capacity to be someone. According to biographer Loney, Andrew was more upset over the removal of his identity marks than he is about the interview. He is unable to march in force. What he was meant to wear, he can't wear. That desire for what has been taken shows a person who is more ensnared in entitlement than before and is unable to recognize that what has been taken is irretrievably lost. There is no way back, according to many inside and outside the palace, despite some speculating that he would make a comeback. Even removing his remaining titles, according to prominent voices, may be necessary but merely symbolic. It would be too risky to leave him half royal. People are reminded of scandal, treachery, and unfulfilled promises. The organization worries that having him in any prominent position will damage the reputation of the company for all time. Now is the moment to inform you about the person who declared his demise after being expelled from the monarchy. By the time the palace issued its last statement, it had all begun. It was over already. The monarchy whispers its executions rather than shouting them. Prince Andrew will defend this case as a private person and will no longer perform any public tasks. It was brief, clinical, and conclusive. The remarks were a funeral, not merely an update. His life as a royal was over, but he was still alive. The silence within the enormous Windsor home he clung to, Royal Lodge, grew intolerable. Once bustling with courtiers and event planners, the phone hardly rang, the staff had been laid off, and the visits had ceased. When it did, it was with reminders rather than invites. It was closing the royal purse. King Charles had said unequivocally that any lingering financial reliance would be short-term. The public hated the man, and the monarchy could no longer afford to support him. He started to understand for the first time what it meant to be untitled, at least in spirit, if not in name. His travel was restricted, and he had fewer security. His daughters also turned into political conundrums. Could he come? Would he be able to lead them down the aisle without making them feel ashamed? Quietly, painfully, and nearly invariably, the answers came. No. The stain just got worse with each attempt at restoration. When he was spotted going with the Queen to Prince Philip's monument in early 2022, the populace immediately reacted negatively. Headlines like "He's back and Britain isn't having it" appeared in newspapers. People outside St. George's Chapel moaned in disdain, wondering why the exiled man was walking next to the Queen. The purpose of the occasion was to represent family unity. Rather, it brought to everyone's attention what the monarchy wished to forget. Senior aides were incensed within the palace walls. Months of damage control were undone in that one appearance. The optics were awful, even if Portia was sympathetic to the Queen's maternal impulse. For the final time, the Queen had officially supported him. Then, in silence, she passed away, and whatever protection was left fell apart. In order to preserve the monarchy's reputation from internal decay, King Charles had waited decades to modernize it. His initial action was decisive. Public life would never be the same for Andrew. He wasn't allowed to stand on the balcony, but he could go to family gatherings. He might reside on royal property, but he wouldn't be the king's representative. Even though he could call himself Duke, the country would not consider him to be one. He was completely excluded at the coronation. There was no salutation, no uniform, and no look at the throne. Instead of being led by formality, he arrived like a relic from a bygone era. His medals were taken off display, and the audience's response was chilly as cameras captured him appearing uneasy. There was silence, the kind that pierces more deeply than sound, instead of jeering. He was frozen out by more than just the general population. Once eager for royal support, charities turned him down. He was removed from honorary boards by universities. To remove the link, the Commonwealth societies that had used his name changed their names. Once a youth leadership organization connected to his sponsorship, the Duke of York's award changed its structure to eliminate any traces of him. He turned into an asterisk and a warning within his own legacy. The petitions became louder in York itself. The public pushed Parliament to legally deprive him of the Duke of York title. Local MPs even publicly expressed their displeasure with the title. Once a symbol of tradition, that one name has turned into a radioactive material. Once a symbol of the city, the man now stood for everything it wished to disassociate itself from. In private, Andrew's reputation and finances fell apart. Millions were spent on legal settlements. According to reports, the Queen avoided a public trial by personally paying a portion of the settlement. However, the harm was irreparable even with that defense. Instead of innocence, the people perceived it as money buying silence. He became smaller, paler, and decreased in every subsequent shot. The man who used to walk arrogantly over palace lawns now shunned cameras completely. He paced the hallways like a ghost of his former self, irritated and lonely, according to former employees. The extravagant birthday festivities were called off. The invitations ceased to arrive. His environment reportedly shrank, privilege by privilege, detail by detail, as even the home pets were allegedly cared for by outsiders. Nevertheless, he continued to think that there was a way out. He continued to hope that he would return to public service because he thought that anger would subside with time. Advisors alluded to private philanthropy, covert charitable endeavors, and anything else to gauge interest. However, none of the attempts succeeded. Anger was rekindled by each journalistic release. Every rumor about his recuperation generated fresh news stories accusing him of having hallucinations. He became enraged once more when the BBC's The Newsnight interview film, which dramatized the moment that terminated his career, aired years later. It made the world relive the humiliation, not because of artistic license. The actor playing him turned into a mirror from which he was unable to escape. It was hailed by critics as the most realistic portrayal of conceit on TV. He had nowhere else to go by this point. Epstein had passed away. His circle of royalty had shrunk to nothing. He had conditional friendships even inside the family. The ghosts of prestige, the crests, the portraits, the reminders of a title that remained only because Parliament hadn't yet revoked it, were all around him. He is now known as the man who learned nothing, according to royal biographers. They refer to his breakdown as a revelation as well as a scandal, demonstrating how power without humility finally consumes itself. And perhaps that is the reality. Andrew's position in the monarchy was not simply taken away. He no longer believed that his privilege would keep him safe forever. Ultimately, no official banishment was required. He turned into an independent one. He didn't have to be destroyed by the public. All they needed to do was stop searching. Because being invisible is a form of punishment for a man who previously lived to be noticed. And it was that person who informed him of the dreadful news. No human. Not a declaration. But the actual world. Silently. Collectively. It had decided it had had enough.